Hi, Westside. This is Tony Marr back with you again for another Wednesday evening Bible study, group discussion, personal reflection time. Um, it was so wonderful being able to be back together in person this past Sunday. If you were there, thank you for being a part of that. If you were not able to make it for whatever reason last week, know that you were missed, and we hope that you were able to watch the video. Really want to thank Dick Bruner for taking care of all of the technical aspects of church the last, oh goodness, 2.5, 3 months. All of these videos, both Sunday mornings and Wednesday, wouldn't be possible without him and the time and effort that he's put into making these happen. So if you weren't able to be there Sunday and still were able to watch the service via video, thank Dick next time that you see him or talk to him. We had a great time Sunday, being back together, even though we were being very precautious and diligent in following all of the guidelines for social distancing to keep everyone safe. It just felt good to be back together. What also felt really good is that the timing couldn't have been better for coming back together, because we're getting into a section of the Jesus story that these next several weeks, these next 4 or 5 weeks, are my favorite series of events that take place. It all takes place in the period of about 24 to 36 hours, and it's just an incredible series of events that unfold, that change the entire course of Jesus' ministry, the lives of the disciples, and the views of people all around the world of this rabbi named Jesus. So this past week, if you weren't able to watch the video, or even if you were in person with us or watched the video from a distance, a quick recap. Jesus has just finished his most extensive time of teaching. The entire message has been basically the Christian life, this life, is not about us, it's all about Jesus. The people are flocking to hear Jesus teach, so much so that he has to get into a boat because the shoreline is so crowded. After the people all leave, Jesus has a little bit of a personal time, a small group study, like we're doing right now with his disciples. And then he says, you know what, let's go over to the other side of the sea. We'll find out this coming week that they go to the region of Decapolis, one of the 10 cities named Gerasenes. It's about a 10-mile journey across the sea. They've never been to that part of the world before on this missionary journey that they're on. And so they set out. It's been a long day. Jesus is worn out. He's tired. He gets into the boat. The disciples, who have a lifetime of history on this sea, they're very familiar with the waters here. And Jesus lays down and goes to sleep. He's exhausted. Well, they get an hour and a half, 2 hours into their journey. They're in the middle of the sea. And a giant storm comes up, a storm unlike anything that these guys who have lived their lives on the water and managing boats have never faced before. They try everything that they can do on their own, bailing the water out, turning the boat in the direction of the waves, against the waves, everything that they've been taught, everything that they know, and none of it is working. The water is pouring over the side of the boat, and finally one of them looks over to see their leader asleep. He walks over, he nudges Jesus, wakes him up and screams, "Jesus, we're going to drown. How can you sleep at a time like this? Don't you even care?" Jesus kind of rubs the sleep out of his eyes. He gets up, looks out at the waves, looks at the disciples who are panicking and running around. And then he points to the disciples and says, "You guys be quiet. Just be quiet." Then he looks out at the storm and says, "And you be still." And the Gospels tell us that immediately the storm stops. The wind goes still, the rain stops, the waves become calm, and the sea is like glass. And the disciples are sitting there absolutely dumbfounded. Jesus turns and looks to them and says, "Why are you so scared? Where's your faith?" And then the last verse that we saw says the disciples looked at one another, terrified, more scared of what they just experienced than they were even of the storm. And in the storm, they were scared for their lives. They looked at each other, terrified, and say amongst themselves, "Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him." We talked a lot Sunday about fears that maybe you had growing up, fears that maybe you have now. And so let's just start this off. What was your biggest fear growing up? Maybe you had a little fun discussion there with people in your home, or maybe you had a good time by yourself just journaling and thinking through what your biggest fear was growing up. Well, what's your biggest fear now? What's your biggest fear right now? We broke from the Gospel of Luke quite a bit this past Sunday to look at both Matthew's account of this situation and Mark's account of this situation. Mark throws a verse in there that Luke leaves out, where after they get into the boat and head over to cross the sea, it says they took Jesus along just as he was. They didn't quite understand who this Jesus guy was yet. They'd seen him do some incredible things, some amazing things, but they really didn't understand who he was. Is there something about God or Jesus that you just don't understand? And is that okay with you? Or does it bother you? The disciples felt like Jesus didn't care. In fact, they said, "Don't you care that we're going to drown?" Have you ever felt like Jesus didn't care about what you were going through? Another thing that we didn't have time to get into on Sunday, but the book of Mark is the only gospel that in verse 36 says that there are other boats that were out on the sea with Jesus and the disciples. What impact is added to this story by the fact that Mark mentions that there are other boats on the sea with Jesus and the disciples? The disciples panic. They've tried everything on their own, and they turn around in a moment of panic and yell at Jesus, "Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?" What implications are found in that question by the disciples? What does it say about their relationship with Jesus? Take just a moment, by yourself or in your group, and read Matthew's account of this story in chapter 8, verse 23 through 27. Now that you've read that, what differences do you see between Matthew's version and Luke's version and Mark's version? What do you take away from these differences? While Matthew has Jesus tell the disciples that they only have a little faith, Mark and Luke asks them where their faith is and why they have no faith. Do you think that being afraid in a dangerous situation is a sign of having no faith in Jesus? Or is it okay to be afraid in dangerous situations? One of the maybe eyebrow raising or maybe thought-provoking things that I said on Sunday was that if you're having storms in your life, then you just might be the closest to Jesus. Christian author and pastor Erwin McManus once said that in the center of God is not the safest place to be. In fact, when you're in the center of God, that may be just the most dangerous place to be. What do you think of these thoughts? Do you think they're true? And if so, do they make you feel better or worse? So if your life were a storm right now, what would your weather forecast be? Would you be partly cloudy? Would you be thunder and chance of lightning? Maybe a hurricane or a tornado? Or maybe your life right now is that time after the storm where the sun is just breaking through the clouds and there's still a little bit of an eerie kind of fog, but it's clearing up. If your life was a storm, what would your weather forecast be? What storms are you going through right now? What can you do to better keep your faith in God rather than in yourself or even in the storm itself? Do you know anyone else that's going through some troubles right now? What can you do to help them and show them love and show them Christ in this time? It was great spending some virtual time with you this past weekend, and great spending some virtual time with you this evening. I look forward to being back with many of you in person this coming Sunday at Westside, Sunday service at 10 a.m. And just a little preview for those of you that are watching, this Sunday is absolutely my favorite passage in all of the Jesus story. So I look forward to seeing you then. Come, be there, be excited, be ready. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful morning together. If you can't make it with us this Sunday, know that we are thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we're here for you. Whatever you need, you can reach out to me or any of the elders or leadership of the church. We would love to pray for you, talk with you. We hope that you have a great rest of your week. See you in some capacity on Sunday morning. Thanks.